Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Latte on Cloud Cost, the podcast that guides you through the complex world of cloud cost optimization. I'm your host, Praneet Chandra, and every now and then we deep dive into strategies, tools, and best practices that help FinOps professionals, engineering leaders, and DevOps teams navigate the financial aspect of cloud computing. With me today is Hassan, co-founder and CEO of Infrasoft. Hassan, please introduce yourself. I can talk about length. Right, but I would like to hear from you, right? Please introduce, you have been in this industry for a very long time. You've done cloud cost optimization several times, right? I think I would call it decades, right? So please, I would love to hear from you.
For sure. Thanks for having me on. So I'm Hassan. I'm one of the founders of Infrasoft. I've been working in cloud costs since 2011, so quite a while now. Actually, funny story, this was pre-AWS having the Cost Explorer. So we didn't have that. So we built one of the first cloud cost management companies out there. And it's been an incredible journey. My background is in tech. And I became a founder and then have since then never worked for anyone else. I've just become a founder and kept doing that, which is the best part.
I know. I feel like being a founder is kind of addictive, right? Once you've actually done it for yourself, you just want to do it again and again. Am I correct in that reading?
There's like a thrill, right? There's like something that pulls you back in the early days. There's to create something from nothing and then see if it works, talk to the users, keep building it, iterating. I love that part.
And my another question, you started your first company in 2011 and you said there was no Cost Explorer. Did AWS copy Cost Explorer from you, or would you say yes, there were early signs of it and then we were doing it all the way?
Yeah, for sure. The best thing that AWS does is listen to their users. So the users were telling us what to build, telling AWS what to build, and that's where Cost Explorer comes from, which is awesome. I think if we talk about trends of what's happening since then, though, the changes that I've seen in the space is, I'd say there's three main trends that are happening or has happened since then in this industry. The first one was, early on, we started talking about multi-cloud, and for a long time, for many years, we just kept saying, oh, multi-cloud is here, but it wasn't really there. Whereas now, multi-cloud is really here. And multi-cloud, not in the terms of a single workload being on multiple clouds, I still don't see that often. But from a central point from an enterprise, they have to support multiple clouds because a team uses some features on Azure, a different team uses AWS, they acquire a company that's using GCP. All these things come into the enterprise. And therefore, from a central platform or the FinOps perspective, you definitely need the multi-cloud. So that's the first main trend that I see has happened since then. The second one is the complexity. So I'll tell you a fun story. When we built our first startup, we tracked how many price points there were in clouds, right? And we were tracking 10,000 price points from AWS. 10,000 back in 2011. Currently, at Infrasoft, we track 4 million. 4 million price points
across all clouds.
AWS, Azure, and GCP from those three cloud providers alone.
Wow.
It is incredible. So the complexity has just gone through the roof. And so the way those price points come to be is every new feature that is released has a different pricing point. Every SKU, the tiers, all these things, you have to know the prices of these things. So that's where the 4 million price comes from, which just makes it incredibly complex.
Exactly. And I think financial engineering is just hard, right? It's not that easy, right? I talk to a lot of companies, right? That's my role being a cloud economist, and everybody talks about we start on ROI talks and it never ends because okay, how do we layer this? Now, how do we layer this? And it gets complicated, right? So point very well taken.
Completely. And the landscape changes underneath your feet. So you can do whatever decision you want this month, and then 2 months from now, there's going to be something new, something changed. And you've got to love that part. If you're in FinOps, you've got to love that part, or else you're just going to get beat up. And then the third thing I'd say is really changed and makes, especially FinOps, exponentially harder is the adoption of infrastructure as code. Now, traditionally, you'd say, okay, infrastructure as code makes things easier. Yes, it does. It makes things easier for everyone in a company to launch whatever they need, whenever they need.
Yeah.
So traditionally, instead of having a central team where you would say, okay, look, all the infrastructure goes through these people, this group, now you have decentralized. So instead of dealing with 20 people, you're dealing with 1,000 or hundreds. And when the decision-making moves to the edges, it's incredibly complicated to teach people at the edges of here's how this thing's going to get priced, or here's how this thing is charged for. And by the way, can you tag our resources? Can you use GP3s? And so you need tooling, right? So and that decentralization just makes things incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I think those are like the three main things. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it just brings back my memory of 2010, right? I'm going really far behind, right? And I would finally deploy one of my first applications back at Deloitte. I used to work with Deloitte, right? And I remember like getting a couple of tech ops and DBAs and everyone to actually deploy an app. And when I look at it today, right, everything is available at fingertips, right? People are just spinning up bedrock models, right? And it is happening. So I think the complexity to do or deploy things have become easier, but it has become more complex in the terms like, hey, are we making wise choices? Are we making good choices as such, right? And this is what I have, like, the first time I landed up into a cost optimization problem was probably 2017, 2018, when I used to work with a high growth AI machine learning startup based out of UK. And suddenly we started signing up big enterprises. Our cloud costs just went that hockey stick, right? Company was not doing a hockey stick growth, but yeah, cloud costs was definitely, right? So that's where, and I was like, how can this be possible? Our engineers are really smart, right? And they know what they're doing. And then we realized, hey, it's actually not the problem. Just we were not built for it. When we thought like, okay, we should be handling terabytes of data, now suddenly we are handling 5 petabytes of data every day. It's difficult for the system. So let's go and evolve, right? And it took us a good amount of time, right? It took us probably like 6-7 months just to get ourselves back in terms of like, okay, that is how we should approach. Because at the first you just think like, oh, let me go and buy 10 reserve instances. Let me go and buy this RISPs and everything. And then you realize, oh, okay, I don't need all of them now.
Yeah, exactly. That's completely true. Like, and then make that so much more complicated when you have 1,000 people making those decisions at the edges. It's like, oh, what do we do?
And everybody promotes this decentralized teams, right? Now, when it is decentralized, right, every engineer can just go and spin up the most expensive instance. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yes, you can turn it off after some time, but he has turned it on, right? So, yeah, that's my observation, right? And that was one of the key motivations why I started my company back then, right? FinOps was this particular thing just to get onto this, right? This has to be solved. This is a problem that if you're a builder, you can only solve it. If you're just seeing it from the outside, you can never solve it, right? From the outside, it looks like, no, it's a simple problem. But once you start building, you get to know, right? Yeah. And that's where it takes me, right? You've done 3 companies in this space till date, right? And you've talked about all the trends that have changed. But what has been different in all these companies, right? Every time you must have solved a really new problem, right? And can you help me understand, right, with all the companies, how with different phases from 2011 to now, what are the problems that you have solved? Because it will help us understand, right, where the extent of this problem is not new, right? This problem always existed. So can you please shed some light for our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. Like whenever I talk to people about this, it's like cloud cost is going to be an evergreen problem. It's always going to be here. So it's not going to be something that you just fix. There's no fixing to happen. It's just part of the package that comes with it, right? In the early days, the visibility was a key thing, right? In 2011, the first thing we built was the visibility because there was nothing to show you how much the costs are going, which resources are being used, and let you slice and dice. So we built that. And once you give visibility, it's like, all right, now I see it. What do I do about it? So then the next phase was, I should either train the end user on what they should do about it, or as we are engineers, we try to automate, we should build recommendations. Like, here's what I'm going to recommend to you, and here's what happens. After visibility was 2 parts. One was the recommendations. I'm going to help you what recommendations there are, which led to the third part, which is the analysis. Is like, why do you have this recommendation? Can I analyze the information behind this recommendation? Should I take this recommendation or not? And these problems each get more and more complicated, right? Because the analysis then, it really depends on the application. Someone needs to know the application. You can't just come with a tool and say, here's a recommendation. You can do some basic stuff, but like the realistic stuff is like on the deep levels. So that's the first wave of tools that came and went and things like that. Then as things changed with IAC and multi-cloud, it became like another wave of the similar things, enabling this across multiple clouds. So you remember a phase we went through where tagging became super important, where you became like, you have to do tagging across multiple clouds and have them match so that when you create a management report, you don't just say, here's our AWS cost, but it's like, here's the application cost and here's the overall cost across everything that it uses and things like that. Fast forward to today a little bit, the way I see it, and this might give us an indication of where this will go in the future, is the decentralization means that, two things. The decentralization means we need to solve it at the edges. Yeah. And two, the infrastructure as code part means we can actually do it free. And this is where like our current company like focused on, which is like, can we actually shift this left? Like shift left happened in security, it happened in testing. Can we do it in FinOps? And that took us a while to figure out, but that's finally what we do now. And we've kind of finally solved a lot of it. There's still a lot more to build, but like a lot of it is there, which is, can we do this stuff? For example, tagging is a great example. Tell the engineer what values and what tags are required on all the resources that can be tagged. Awesome. Let them make the decision. They're at the edges. They can make those decisions and have that going forward. And that's what the shift left is happening. Now, that was, let's say, 2 years ago, and that adoption came in. And then now where we have the FinOps Foundation as well, where JR talks about this, which is the FinOps in the design phases. So this is where I see it going forward. So currently, can you help the architects? Like I haven't seen any tools that really do this right now. Where can you help the architects make decisions? Can you help them with deciding between an EC2 or a Lambda, like the trade-offs and the implications and these things? Because a lot of those decisions are made early on. That's where I see it going more and more, which is like across the organization, from product to engineers to architects to finance, understanding in their own workflow with their own view on things, how these things should be built and how the penalty should be built.
So if I have to really summarize it all, from being a descriptive kind of recommendation that, hey, do this, right, if you're on cloud, we went to a place where we were actually prescriptive about it, right? Hey, you should always do this, right? And now, if I have to really think about, we are trying to be predictive about it, right? Like, okay, let's predict what could actually go wrong, right? And do I summarize it correctly for our listeners? Or do you think there's 100%. More?
No, 100%. It came from visibility, and we saw visibility alone wasn't enough. We need the action. Yeah. Well, the action started to happen, but then the decentralization meant it's super hard to have the action happen, and therefore you need the tools. And now we can be way more predictive. Before these things, let's fix this. Why are we waiting? It wastes so much engineering time, right? You have to if you get stuff, go back to the engineers. You're always fighting with the engineers because it's like, do I do feature delivery or do I tag this resource? Oh, feature delivery is going to win any given day, right? If you ask me, right, like I used to literally, I remember my days back from engineering, and then certain engineers would say, hey, I think we should dedicate a sprint for tech debt. And I was like, we already are delayed on this release, and still our code is not great, and we have to go back and fix it. And I think when I try to bring a very similar construct to people around cloud debt, right, I was like, hey, all of us have actually embraced tech debt and welcome it as well, right? Every quarter, let's do a tech debt sprint. Every month, let's do something. But what about cloud debt? None of us are actually talking about it. It's only when CFO actually comes and slams a bill of CTOs desk, right? Hey, what's happening? Right? That is where everyone comes into action. So I think it's high time that industry should start embracing there is going to be a cloud debt, right? As you said, right? It cannot be solved by just simple method, one simple way, or it's a forever problem, right? And I think that's easy. Is that a keyword that you've used before? Cloud debt? I like that. They should finalize that term. That seems like a really good.
Actually, I use it in some of my literatures or some of my when I talk to customers, right, about cloud economics and everything. I keep on educating people about cloud debt, right? A great way. I was talking to our engineering leader a couple of weeks back, and he was telling me how he is actually able to measure much better engineering performance, right? He's not looking at the GitHub commits and those all things, but time to feature delivery, similar features, how are we planning our systems? And he said, I could see a lot of considerable improvement over there. And I just asked him, like, yeah, that's great. Now you know engineers, but are they actually deploying the right thing? And you're like, no, I don't have that visibility. I need to go back to my DevOps team and TechOps team to really understand. And I think that at that point I told him, right, you are not understanding cloud debt. Let me explain it to you. And then he was like, okay, this could be another metrics, right? What has my team worked last week and how much actually preemptive we have saved money and what were the extra actions we took to save the money. And I think we should formalize this term. I think we should do a joint post or write write a one-pager on it, right? What is cloud debt?
I like that. But yeah, you're completely right. Which is like, I see this. So in Infrasoft, we actually measure this. So there's a cool thing we have where we measure. So Infrasoft does the shift left part, right? And the engineer, tell the engineer before they merge their code, how much their code costs, how to fix all the issues, upgrade all the GP2s to GP3s, old instance types, or like even things like lifecycle policies, or if you're taking RDS to a non-production environment, well, use single AZ, don't use multi-AZ. Like all these things are built in, like the brain built in. What we measure is the number of issues that have been fixed by the engineer before they deploy. Meaning the pull request was opened with issues, they saw the comment, they fixed it and then merged the code. That is like engineers speeding up. We literally show this back to our customers, and it's incredible to see the speed that happens when you do that.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I will go back to the earlier phrase that you should spin off slip, right? And I'm a newbie engineer, right? I'm a DevOps engineer, just 1 year in, and you tell me this another fancy term called a ship spin-off left. And I'm like, what is this? First of all, I'm not a financial engineer. I'm a DevOps, right? I want to deploy more and more things. I want more meaty problems, right? And I strongly believe if we have to really have this cost-centric or cost-conscious culture, as we like to talk about in FinOps, right? I think everybody should understand, right? So can you explain to me as a 1-year-old DevOps engineer who has just come out and has itched to deploy Kubernetes everywhere, right? What does shift spin-off slip mean, right? What does it mean to me as an engineer? What does it mean to me as a DevOps? And how should I actually inculcate in whatever I'm learning, right? So,
Yeah, totally. So defining the term first, shifting left basically means putting this information earlier in the phases of development versus later at a very high level, right? So a couple of examples that I give, which is when we look at it from a FinOps perspective, is can we put the information in the path of the engineer before they deploy? Something that surprises non-technical people, and every technical person knows this, is there is no checkout screen for the cloud. Right? Yeah. There's literally, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and no one will ever tell you that this is how much it costs. So our first vision of Infrasoft was the checkout screen, the cloud's checkout screen. So putting that left means engineer knows this information before they deploy. As an engineer, I'm actually going to use Wix's example. So Devere from Wix did this amazing talk on in FinOps X, where he talks about efficient engineering and engineers just being better engineering, financial information decision-making, being in the engineering workflow, making them better engineers. And we already have this for performance and things like that, right? Where you say, okay, I'm going to launch an application and it's going to take 20 seconds for every button click to respond. Well, okay, but that's bad engineering. Like the user's not going to stick around for 20 seconds while you save their file. And no one's going to stick around for that. And the exact same thing will happen for cost. Okay, fine. We can launch a feature which will cost the company a couple of $100,000 and we don't even make that revenue back. Well, okay, the company fails as a whole. Like we lose more money than we actually gave for a customer. These are all the things that will have to come in to the engineering workflow, especially as the decision making is happening at that point. Like if you launch infrastructure, you're essentially becoming the buyer. That is a decision making that you buy. And so therefore cost is one of those things that you have to start thinking about. I see it, and this is a career opportunity, which is like, as you start to develop this muscle and you start to understand these things more, you become a much better engineer, right? We look at performance, we look at cost and things like that. I actually see the interesting trend, which is the more senior you are in DevOps and SRE, the more you care about this information. I did a bunch of research and I went back and dug into it a bunch with our users. And the main reality is, if you don't care about this stuff, you'll see what happens in a longer period of time. Someone from outside the team will be like, who designed this stuff? Like, this is not working. And that is not a good way to engineer. It's like, I rather have this information fixed from upfront, especially, well, I rather have it fixed upfront. That's just there.
Yeah.
However, the other side of the coin is, how much stuff are we going to put in the engineering workflow and expect them to still deliver features? It's like, all right, they need some time to build features as well. And this is the criticality of where tooling can come in and help. It's like, the tool should be super low noise, like it should not be noisy. It should tell me actionable, exactly what I should do in order to action this. It should be quick. It shouldn't be like this dragged out, click on this dashboard link, log in, figure out what you need to do, come back. Don't waste the engineering time. That's a very valuable resource. So we can shift it left with tools. And that is the parts. So as an engineer, I think that's important. As a company, that's important. And long-term, that will happen. So I see those.
And you consider it as a hard skill, or do you consider it should be like a ways of working? Sorry, I'm just going more and more deeper into this engineering conversation, but this literally intrigues me, right? Is it a hard skill? Like, I should be like GKE certified Kubernetes administrator, right? Or is it like more of ways of working that I should inculcate? It's like the Scrum process, or is it like a hard certification I should talk about? Like, where do you place this particular thing?
I'll reflect on my experience. I remember when I first started the first startup, we had this thing where we looked at engineering, and I said, I don't care where you got a qualification from or anything. If you can code and you can like bring amazing products live, I don't care where you learned to do that, as long as that's the way. Yeah. And I see the same thing here. Certifications and stuff like that are awesome. In reality, practice is where like the actual value is delivered. So there's a bunch. In fact, Infrasoft has got an open source component. You have a VS Code plugin. You can literally install the VS Code plugin, and as you type code, it'll tell you how much that code costs, and you'll start to learn. Like, it's not even like you're not going out of your way. You just start to learn. It's a muscle that you develop and you build, and I think it's built in that way. The key parts, certifications and stuff are always fine, but I lean away from those, and I lean away like towards like actually do it and see it. It's so much more fun that way. It creates the intrinsic motivation.
And then it's also, you figure out like how much a bad decision can actually cost you, right? And I think like you told this point, right? Like, there's no checkout in cloud, right? I can literally go and spin up the most expensive instance on AWS, and nobody's going to come back to me asking for it. Yeah, there will be repercussions, but at that point, like, yeah, I just said that. So you really understand the value of making good decisions, right? And I think it's a life skill that you all should have, right?
Agreed. But also, we should be recognized that this is really complicated stuff. So it's not fair to blame engineers, right? They're already doing a bunch. So it's like, maybe we're biased because we're both engineering backgrounds, but like, it's like, there's 4 million prices. What did you expect me? Like, I didn't know how much provisioned IOPS cost. I just thought we needed it, so I put it in. With this tooling, though, it can actually help. It's like, wow, I didn't know this was this expensive. Let me figure out what do I need and what I don't need here.
And I think that's a right way as well, because I remember my days, right, working at high growth startups as we kept on climbing more into Series D, E, F, or even approaching IPO. Suddenly there would be the finance that would be like, hey, let me do capitalization costs. And you're like, okay, what do you want to do? Employee salary? Okay. How much it takes to deliver a feature? Okay, it took like 4 people to deliver it in 2 months. Why infra cost is so much? And like, no idea, nobody has a clue. Okay, now we want to divide the cost and everything, and it becomes very difficult, right? I keep telling this to folks, right? It's very easy to add just 2 instances when your service goes down. Right? Okay, the CPU and RAM combination is not working. I need to up level. But when you are wasting it, there's nobody flagging it. And I understand it's a business model for cloud providers, right? but nobody's flagging. So you always need to be preemptive about it. Plus, be more aggressive, right? Wherever the mistake's been done, we should go and fix it, right? So, no, that makes sense.
Like that's what happens, right? Traditionally, you don't do anything, and then 1 year, everyone comes down. It's like, all right, everyone get an optimization, and it's so disruptive. And it needs to be like on a continuous versus this wavy action wave kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think all of us have been proponent about this continuous cloud cost optimization. I think I'm slowly seeing, right, as companies understand the FinOps and cloud debt, they would slowly start getting onto that bandwagon as well. So that's great. So if I have to really summarize what Shift FinOps Lift means to me as a 1-year-old DevOps engineer is, it's more of building muscle around what should be your infrastructure choices, right? Be cognitive of what we are actually deploying and where it is deploying and how it is getting used as well. And then this actually builds on two kinds of things. One is I run highly efficient infrastructure at a lower cost, right? And then the second thing is I know what are the good decisions in life, right? This is a good decision or not, right? So yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now I will zoom out a little bit, right? I also speak with a lot of CTOs who have got these heavyweight engineers who have spent probably 2 decades doing infrastructure and then cloud and everything. How do I bring this ideology of Shift FinOps Lift, right? Like, yes, nobody would say no if I would start pushing them like, okay, we are Shift FinOps Lift from tomorrow, right? It doesn't happen that way, right? So how do I align my teams? How do I build this ideology, right? That, hey, if we do this, this is better, right? Like, for example, we all know following up a Scrum process, doing up a sprints is a lot better in terms of more predictability and a good quality software that gets written. How does this Shift FinOps Lift? What should I tell my team? Like, tell me.
Yeah.
I'll start.
Great question. I've actually learned that when you're talking to engineering or anyone who is actually building and doing stuff as the builders, PowerPoints are terrible. Don't use slides. Show them. It's super easy. So the best things I've seen work for us and our customers is you actually open up VS Code. You have the Infrasoft plugin in there, and you show them what it means to shift left. You start typing some Terraform code, and you say, look, the immediate calculation on the right-hand side is right there. And then you edit, and you save, and you see the updated. It's like that's an immediate curiosity that creates that pull. That's important. Where there's like, oh, cool, that's a very cool tool. It's a very cool, easy thing to use, and it's helping me with my coding abilities. Then you go into pull requests and you show them how that would look like in a pull request. It's like no one's blaming you. It's like an actual super interesting thing that gets plugged in and is appended to your process and it's helping you there. So overall, the best thing I've seen is have your senior SREs or platform engineers create a demo and then show the demo. Show a live demo. Let it be live because it's cool. That creates the intrinsic motivation to pull. Once you have those initial people that are pulling and you're showing them the value and things like that, it's pretty easy to cascade and go wide because everyone will start to compare and see, that's working really well for them. I'll start pulling it. So that's the best way I've found it to work. For the CTO down, for the CTO up, the values are super clear. The values are to sell these kind of tools and like to buy these tools is time saving. Because your engineers are way faster when we fix these cloud debt. If we don't take on the cloud debt, everything's going to be faster. Yeah. And preventative in nature of cost. Like we can prevent waste from the start in terms of dollar value versus after the fact. So that's how it goes down and how it would also go up as well.
Do you also feel there is a place for somebody like an agile coach? How they coach teams on like what could be a good practice around the Scrum, around the sprints. Do you also think there has to be this cloud efficiency coach? Again, I know FinOps practitioners are supposed to be that, but I also feel like they are too much entrenched into the actual execution, more of operational role and not really helping teams build out this prescriptive method that they should follow. So where do you see this role of influencer within this org sits? Is it like, okay, let me just take my most enthusiastic senior, most SRE and let him give him an initiative, go and figure this thing out? Or do you think there is a place where FinOps practitioners can actually expand their role, where it can become much more aware.
I definitely think the FinOps people can expand their role. And look, we've seen this in the histories, right? So what we used to have was the CCOE. In fact, companies still have Cloud Center of Excellence, right? So the Cloud Center of Excellence is awesome because they start to show tools. They say how we can do it. It's not forced upon people, but hey, different business units can adopt it and you see it and things like that. We had DevRel teams. A lot of customers just now I've got developer relationships teams who are internal, who are looking after developer experience inside the company. And they're saying, look, we're going to improve the developer experience via these tools. Because currently it goes through Jira, it goes back, and that's painful. It's like, no, let's just put it in there. So that's a lot of things as well. Now, having seen those, the FinOps team can grow to have those as well. Like we can take learnings from those things and put it in. And ultimately, it is a relationship with those people. But also, if you get some really intrinsic motivated SREs and they're senior inside business units, that's going to drive significant. That's going to be a significant driver in there.
Got it.
Yeah. So the more
I'm
people
making more and more notes. Yeah, I think this would be my longest notes that I've been writing this whole day, right? So
we should do a share screen. Actually, we should show how you do it. Like exactly what I say. You should show the engineers. We should show you how it works.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, definitely we would do that. Yeah. Now, getting on to one of the most interesting topic, and we were just talking about it before hitting the record button on this podcast, right? How does insurgence of generative AI will change things? Now, I am asking this question from two fronts. One is now product building is going to become even cheaper, right? I remember reading this book called Prediction Machine, like back in 2018, where it tells about why. I think most of us have read it somehow, right? Like, I think why AI and machine learning will have surgeons because of like cost of CPU and RAM is going down. There's so much of cloud. It's so easy to build software and store data and process data. And now I'm seeing with generative AI, okay, there's another wave to it, right? People are doing vibe coding, vibe marketing and everything as such, right? So how do you think, right, first of all, these generative AI products, how are they going to impact the cloud costs? And then the second thing is, this generative AI has a space in optimizing cloud costs or FinOps as a whole, right? So two questions, you can take one after another. Yeah.
I want to take the first one on, which is like what happens when generative AI gets used a lot more.
Yeah.
As you start to generate more code, especially when we get into the phase where infrastructure code starts to get released. It's still early on, like we're seeing a lot of application code, but infrastructure code is less because criticality of the infrastructure is way higher, right? You can take down your entire system with bad infrastructure code versus application, okay, a button doesn't work. So with infrastructure code, as you generate more and more, the first problem that I talked about, the decentralization, just becomes incredibly wild. Like it goes everywhere. So you need the guardrails and things like that. And this is what we see with security happen as well. So it's a very parallel to security, which is like we can generate as much code as we need, but it needs to be secure. And by the way, it can't cost so much. You can't fail the company on it as well. So that part, I think as the adoption grows, so well the complexity and the hardships of that. So that's part one, I'd say. Now, the other side, which is some of the cool things I've seen, is like you ask questions of a LLM about your cloud costs, about like what's happening and stuff like that. That stuff is really cool to me. However, I don't know if we're there yet in terms of trusting the numbers that are coming out. I don't know what you're seeing, but like a lot of it is still getting developed, and the prompts and the things that go into creating the answer become super important as well. The data becomes important. What do we include? What do we exclude? And things like that. And so that, I think, more and more will have to come in, and it will definitely help more and more. But I'm a little cautious still. It'll take some time for it to be solved. I don't know. What are you seeing?
So there are like two things. Full disclaimer, I was just on to MCP and Flowwise last week, right? So I'm going to be much more biased right now. So I think I was playing around this whole thing, putting up this focus specification, that whole data set, right? Try to make sure like LM can respond to my queries. I think I still have to hop on a lot more steps, right? It is still not place where I can like, hey, what are the patterns that you identify? I have to still go very granular, like, hey, this is the thing. And then it doesn't understand a lot of things like EC2 others. Well, great example. What is EC2 others? Half of the world probably doesn't know what is EC2 others, right? We all know EC2 others, yeah. Probably we don't know, right? So that becomes very, very tricky in that sense, right? But on the other hand, when I see companies like Replit and all, which are also not allowing you just to generate the code, was also deploy, I feel that, hey, it might be great as a POC. It might be great to do it for a good MVP, but am I ready to take this code and really scale it up for my company? And that's where I think this whole IAC complexity will start appearing, right? Imagine every department. I think for a very long time, we all have been suffering from shadow IT. As I keep on hearing, every department goes by one BI tool. In a company that we've got 12 BI tools for 12 departments. Why? Nobody knows, right? And I think this will start happening even more. So people will be more cautious about security. And then you might be paying the same cloud vendor again and again, right? Without optimizing anything. Now you might even generate a lot more cloud waste because yes, everybody's deploying on cloud, nobody's deploying on-prem. You're paying it some other way, right? Either you pay $10 to AWS for a light sale or you pay $15 to Replit, right? Somebody is using behind the scene VMs, right? And I think this will become even more important for us, for as engineers, right? When we keep on using all of these different tools, what's the kind of impact, right? What's the kind of impact with users? I think we are way past those foundation model debate and all. Should we do a foundation model? I think there are enough players. But as you go more and more onto this agentic workflows, this MCPs and everything, I think now it is going to become even more challenging because now you will try to hook up all of the world's data and make a poor LLM respond to that. Okay, go and do these all tasks, right? And I think it's going to be expensive, right? So that's what I'm seeing right now. And I'm still like sitting on the sidelines, stand up eating popcorn just to see where it evolves. But yeah, fine, I'll get there.
I'm on the vibe coding side of things, which is like this is really cool, and I want to see more and I want to do more of it as well. But similar, I wouldn't say I'm all in. I'm like on the side still learning and like playing with it and things like that.
And I think we are not understanding cost implications at this point of time, right? Mm-hmm. Because all of us are actually using, like I was talking to a company, I think it's been a month or so. They are building out voice agents and everything for insurance verification and everything. And it's a wonderful product used by some of the large insurance companies as well. And they are using a couple of managed services. And they were like, hey, how can I reduce costs? I was like, you're a managed service, you cannot do anything. Right. Yeah. Well, they tell you the pricing, that's the pricing. Yes, you can do some discounting and everything. But if you really want to go next level, yes, your infrastructure engineers need to know how to deploy a model. Yes, you want to use Amazon Bedrock. Yes, go ahead, use it. You want to use Google's or you want to use Azure, OpenAI. Go ahead and do it. But you will need to have to go through that learning curve or just compromise on cost. And I think this will have a ripple effect because I was just trying to talk to another founder friend who's building out a new company in generative AI space. He was like, hey, my margins are just 10 to 12%. And I was like, we are used to 60-65% SaaS margins. How are we going to accommodate this 10-12% margin? I don't know, right? And I understand, yeah, we don't need so many people, but the cost of marketing and sales is not going to go down. Any good.
No, look, I think like ultimately that's a very good point. Like in our software space, we've learned, you spend it. It's okay. The margin's enough to absorb stuff, but that is not the norm in the industry, in other industries, I should say. I think, look, ultimately it can't just be cool tech. It has to deliver some value, and either they charge more from the customer or you like make an efficiency, you increase your revenue. Like something's value has to be created.
I think more meaty use cases apart, not just doing chatbots, I think would actually ease some value, right? I think I describe it as like 2013, 2014 era when App Store and Google Play suddenly came out and everybody was building random applications. So I thought of the day was one of the applications and that was one of the highest garnered. Or Yo, if you remember, for example, you could just send Yo, right? And I think we are in a very similar phase right now where everybody is just building out these random experimental projects. And I think it takes like a couple of years before we start settling in and building out real meaningful stuff, as I like to call it, right? I think that's where we are.
I'm excited for it. I want to see that stuff. Like I'm starting to see early indications of it. Some of our customers are using it and sharing their use cases. I'm like, whoa, that is really cool actually. On how they use their own data and how they do autonomy and things like that, which is really impressive. And I'm excited for it. I want to see what happens.
Now, taking it to a second part, how do you think the next wave of cloud cost optimization, FinOps tools will start using generative AI, right? I know we built a chatbot on focus data, but let's talk more. That is like very shallow.
It's a great question. It comes down to like, I think it'll come down to automation of like how much stuff will have to be automated. But remember, we are talking about infrastructure. So a lot of automations might create a lot of risk. So it really depends, I think, also which segment of the market you sell into. So for us, we focus on the larger enterprise companies and things like that. There's already processes in place that you have to get approval from a human. A human has to be in the loop before infrastructure is changed, right? So I think that's important to note. So we can try to automate some of the FinOps tools, but the issue becomes one, human has to be in the loop. And currently, at least, it cannot be directly changed in the cloud because you cause drift. Like you're creating infrastructure drift. So it can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to call AWS and shut this resource down or like change this type to this type. Because the next time the Terraform runs, it's overwritten. So you're just playing whack-a-mole. So like those are the couple of problems that we need to solve to get there. Above, exactly, I agree with you, above the standard like immediate use case of like, oh, let me just talk to this ChatGPT style thing, interface, and it'll tell me the focus data. It's like, sure, that would be cool and that'll answer us some questions and stuff. But again, we're talking about the 2011 wave. Visibility was first. This is visibility. Action is where the real value is, and that requires a bunch more work.
Totally agree. I think I'm trying to explore avenues when I talk about our teams over here at CloudKeeper, right? Hey, how can we really bring it that eases up customers' life? And I think it's a debate, right? We just keep on going, yes, we are improving ourselves by using Cursor, GitHub, Copilot, and everything else. But like, hey, how is it actually going to change our customers' life? And we should think about it. And I think that's where we'll find some good use cases. Like security has figured it out, right? Security has figured it out over a period of time. And I think it's time that we also start figuring it out, right? So
yeah, agreed. And that's like, remember when ChatGPT first came out and we were like, what am I going to ask it? I want to test this. What do I ask it? So like, you don't even know the questions. So ask you like, I'm just going to try random questions. So we can provide the chat interface and stuff like that on FinOps data, but it's like, what do I ask it? Like, what do I in order to get the answer that I actually want, or to test it and things like that as well. I think we'll go through some learnings.
Yeah, and I think probably it might act as a piece that actually brings entire company to be more cost centric, right? When you actually understand, hey, what is data transfer cost, right? Right now, if you ask even the best of the engineers, like they'll be like scratching their head, why do we have so much data transfer cost, for example, right? So I think people start understanding why we should not use multi-AZ, right? That example that you gave, right? You're a non-prod, do you really need RDS with multi-AZ? Are you sure, right? And I think these all things is where the bridge starts, like in all the visibility, right? Through LLMs and all. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Great. Now, I think we are towards the end, right? And this is my favorite question, right? What are your top 3 tips that you talk to CTOs, head of engineering, like who are actually starting on their journey of cloud optimization or FinOps, right? What are 3 tips that you give them, right?
Oh, good question. I like that question. Okay, first thing I would actually step back and understand before you get into any optimization discussions is the formula of cloud costs. And the formula of cloud costs is cloud costs equals usage multiplied by price. The usage component is decided by engineers. What resources they use, how much of them do they use, how they architect it, all that. That is fully engineering driven. Times price. Price is not engineering driven in the majority of cases. So those are things like, do we buy RIs and savings plans? Do we negotiate EDPs, enterprise agreements, all these things? It's very important to understand the differences between these two and who's involved at each point. The pricing component does not impact engineering. You can buy as many reservations as much as you want. Realistically, the capacity reservation isn't the main reason you do that. It's like the pricing component. That part can be done in a central place with a financed look on it. So that's important to know, because you're essentially doing ROI calculations. What is the risk of how long I'll run this thing for before we break even and go into a profit mode? And that's the decision. The only exception I'll highlight for the technical people in their mind, they're like, it's wrong if we come to spot instances, is actually both. Yes, that's the exception to their rule as well. So there's like spot instances where the price is different, but it has to be architected for it as well. So I focus on the usage side, because the way I think about it is, imagine you have a server that is 100% wasted. Awesome. Buy a reservation for that and you'll reduce it by 60%. You're still wasting 40%. So the usage optimization part, although is much harder and the decentralization comes into place, is the meat of the problem. Like, that's where you start with the biggest optimizations, the biggest impactful optimizations. And then you should do the RIs and savings plans and things like that as well.
Totally agree.
I would start with that picture to understand that phase. And then you know where to focus on. Is that a finance question or an engineering question that we're going for?
Correct.
Then if we go down the engineering path, I'd start to think about a couple of things. One is the easy stuff. The easy stuff is the initial things you pick up on, which you can optimize your GP2s to GP3s, old instance types, the extended support costs and things like that. There's a lot of these things. So that's where the problem is. There's significant of them and they're decentralized. So start with those are really good early ones to get to success. Once you start showing success, that's where the snowballs kind of starts going, right? And then realize there's the harder stuff. And we talked about this a little bit, which is the re-architecture. Like, all right, some of the majority of these cost savings might actually come from a re-architecture. That will require a lot of effort. It would save a lot of costs, and they need analysis before you start. So it would be good to get in your mind clear of what am I approaching as the problem I see it. Am I rebuilding the car, or am I just cleaning up and putting new tires on and inflating the tires? There's very importance to know between those, and then go from there.
Yeah, great analogy, that one.
Fuel level, and go from there.
That's a great analogy. Like, are you going to redo your car or like just put on new tires and take it for a run?
Yeah, that's great. It will bring in efficiencies, but yeah, it has less impact. It's immediate to do and things like that.
And I think your first point is something like I keep on preaching, right? I would say I keep on preaching because, hey, we have got enough ROIs, enough SCs, we don't need any optimization. And then like, hey, you actually just needed a hatchback and you went and bought a SUV just because somebody was giving you 10% discount, right? How is it a wise decision?
Right. Exactly. I remember early on in Infrasoft life, I wrote a blog, which is like, imagine you ask an engineer to go from LA to New York and they walk into a parking lot and there's a Ferrari there and a Ford there with no pricing. They're like, well, okay, I like the Ferrari. I'll choose the Ferrari. But put a pricing in front of them and say, that's $1 million and that's 20,000 for the total end to end. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to probably choose that one.
Very well, right. Agreed. And I think totally up for this. I think still a lot of teams have not come to terms around decentralized optimization. So
yeah,
they are up for like decentralized computing, but I think this decentralized optimization and central buying should take us a long way, right?
Yeah. Great point. Early days. It's early days, but though it will get there.
Yeah, I think still true to this, right? Cloud is eating the world, right? But yeah. It's still slow. Yeah. I was like reading the FinOps, but I was like, still so many people are on-prem. Are you serious? Is this data wrong? And then I went back and checked. Still so much of things are on-prem. And when I look at like the expanse, when everything from this on-prem mainframe moves to cloud, oh God, we are looking at a different beast altogether. I think in 5 years we'll still be talking again on this. I think we'll be tackling very different problems.
It's going to be evergreen. We're always going to be here.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Hassan. Yeah, this was really enlightening for me as well. I've got like 2 full page of notes. If you want it, I'm going to write a book in the sense all enough, but I can write a blog. Yeah. But just to summarize for everyone, right, what we talked about today was, first of all, Hassan's journey. That's been a great journey. Your inspiration to many now. Like 14 years dedicated solving to a single problem is Hassan, right? And 3 different types, right? In 3 different areas, right? From visibility to recommendation to the future of decentralization and doing everything around it. Your adoption of IAC, right? I think this is something is very under spoken as such, right? That IAC, doing better IAC can actually reduce cloud costs, right? I think our listeners have this thing today. And then our FinOps and CloudNet. I think that calls for a joint post or a joint webinar, whatever we do it, right? And then definitely everything around automation and everything takes the front seat, right?
Completely.
So
I agree. I really enjoyed this, Praneet. Thanks so much. This is a good discussion. I like chatting with you.
yeah, thank you, Hassan. Yeah.